Hey, this is OXDF, and today I'm going to do a deep dive into a Python one-liner that I found particularly interesting. This came up in the Day 3 Advent of Code challenge, and I use it. Basically, I needed a way to take a list and get the first three items, and then the next three items, and then the next three items. And in Stack Overflow, I came across this one that's on the screen right here, and this kind of one-liner. And on first look, it just looks kind of like black magic, but as you dive into it, all the pieces come together and it actually makes perfect sense, and it's kind of beautiful. So I was going to do just a quick deep dive on it. So let's dive in here. So I've got in the center here, I've got the line, and we're going to kind of jump around to the different pieces of it. So we'll start off with iter the list. So iter is going to take this object called the list, or our list of things, and it's going to turn it into an iterator. In Python, an iterator is any class or object that defines two functions. That's implemented we call this dunder iter and dunder next. And so dunder iter is going to do any initialization necessary and then return itself. And then next will continue to return the next items out of it until it's complete, or infinitely in some cases. So this is a Fibonacci sequence. Fibonacci's the numbers start with 0, 1, and then you get the next number by adding the previous two. So 0 plus 1 is 1, 1 plus 1 is 2, 1 plus 2 is 3, 2 plus 3 is 5, 3 plus 5 is 8, etc. And so you can see here we do the same thing by we're returning our original b. In this case, we're starting at 1, some start at 0, but either way. And then updating a and b to get to the next, ready for the next state. You may see this more in this kind of format, which is known as a generator. All generators are iterators, not all iterators are generators. But this is an example where we set a and b equal to 1, 0, and 1. And we're just going to do a while loop, and we're going to yield b. So each time next is called, it's going to return, you're going to get back that b. And then each time you call next again, it's going to run until it gets to the yield again. So updating a and b and then returning b again. So in this case, where we're applying iter to a static list of a certain number, effectively what it's going to do is going to make an iterator that looks kind of like this. For each item in the list, it's going to return the item. So the first time you call, it's going to get the first item. Next time you call next, it's going to get the next item, until eventually we run out of items. And then when it's called, we're going to return a stop iteration exception. And things like for loops, for example, know how to handle this. So when they are forring over an iterator, when the stop iteration comes, it knows, oh, time to exit my for loop. I don't throw this exception. The user doesn't see it, but I handle it and I continue from there. So we can kind of think about it in our head of like, we create an iter on the list. It creates this, I'm showing these gears to be my iterator object, which now points at the first object in the list. And then I call next on it and I get 1 back, and the iterator kind of updates and points at 2. And then I call it again and I get 2 back, and now it updates and points to 3, and I get 3 back and it updates and points to 4, and then I get 4 back and it updates and points to 5. I get 5 back and it kind of points at nothing. So the next time I call next, I just get a stop iteration. So that's how iterators basically work. So let's look now at what is this, like something comma times group size. So for this part, we're going to jump straight into a terminal, and we're actually going to look at a Python terminal. And so the question here is, what does this x comma notation thing? And what it's actually doing is defining a tuple. So if we do like 1 comma that, we're going to get back this tuple. We could say x equals 1 times that. And we can say type of x, and we can see that's a tuple. Now that's different than if we do that, where we get 1, because you can see that just returns 1. In fact, if we do y equals that, we do a type on y, we'll see that's an integer. And so this is just trying to differentiating between parentheses used for math and a tuple. And so if anytime you have comma in the parentheses, that's what makes a tuple. And so you can say, you know, you can have strings in here. We could do things like this. That's also a tuple. And we don't need the trailing comma, but just if we're going to only have 1, it has to be that. Otherwise, again, it just thinks those are parentheses. So then what happens if we're going to multiply that by something? If we do times 3, oh, well, that's, again, parentheses, not a tuple, so it just makes 3 A's. But if we do that, it gives us 3 A's in the tuple. So this is our example of where if we now have the generator, we want to get multiple of those generators, so we're going to multiply by that. All right, now back to the main line. And so now let's finally talk about zip. So zip is a function, it's a built-in function, and it's going to take a set of things, and it's going to try to iterate them and combine them. And so, for example, if we took zip and we passed it this x and y, so x is 1, 2, 3, y is ABC, when we call zip on those, it's going to take the first off of each one of them, pair them together into a tuple, and make that the first object in the list. The second object in the list will be the second objects, pairing together the second objects in each of the inputs, and so on through the end of the list. If either list is longer than the other one, it will stop at the end of the shortest one. And it doesn't have to just be 2 lists. It could be 5 lists. And if there's 5 lists, let's say A, B, X, Y, Z, Q, Y, Q, say 4 lists, X, Y, Z, Q, then this would just be the first from X, the first from Y, the first from Z, and the first from Q, and then the second, and so on. And so it's a way to group things together so that you can loop over multiple items at the same time. The other thing important here is this star structure, because we're not passing into zip the thing, we're passing in star the thing. And this is an expansion notation. And the reason it's useful is, let's say we have this function here of nums. And it doesn't really matter what it's doing, but it's taking 3 numbers and it's multiplying the first 2 together and subtracting the third one. And so we have this vector v, which is 4, 5, 10. And we want to pass it to nums. Well, we can't call nums on v, because then it's going to say, well, A is the list 4, 5, 10, and it didn't give me a B or C, and there's no default value, so I'm going to throw an exception. So what we can do, I guess, if we wanted to, is call like nums of v0, v1, v2. But that's just kind of that's ugly to write. It's not fun. It's a pain. And so we have this other notation where we pass it nums star v, and star is going to expand out v beyond its take its v3 things and make those the first 3 things passed to nums. So we can go back to the beginning now. We have all the pieces we need to understand what's going on here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to pass into this iter function our list. And so our list is we're going to need an iterator pointing to our list. And then we're going to turn that into a tuple, okay? And then we're going to multiply that by group size so that really now we have, like, in this case, when I'm trying to get 3s, I've got 3 copies of the iterator in a tuple. Now, when I use the expansion notation to pass that to zip, I'm going to be passing in three different copies of the same iterator to zip. And that means as it loops over, so it's going to say, okay, first item, give me your first object. That'll be the first object. Second item, give me your first object. Well, the iterator now is going to grab the second object from the list. And then the third object is going to grab the third iterator is going to grab the third object from the list. And it's going to tuple those together and it's going to go back. And it's going to say, okay, what's my second thing to return? Okay, well, each of you give me one more thing. And that's going to be the 4th, 5th, and 6th thing. And it'll bunch those together and send them back as the second part. And that is how we're going to group things together. And that's how this all works out. So bit of a different kind of video here today. Hopefully it was kind of interesting. I thought it was really fun to figure out exactly how this worked. And thanks for sticking around with me. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.